In keeping with one of my side points in the sermon from last Sunday, I decided to break the rules today. You'll have heard we were commemorating Thomas Gallaudet and Henry Winter Sile. But the gospel I just read is not the one the church says we're supposed to read on that occasion. I chose to use the one from last Sunday for a reason, but first just a quick history of those two people. Thomas Gallaudet was born in the 1820s to a congregational minister and a mother who was deaf. His father was very involved in the very early days of deaf education, and when Thomas was a young adult, he suddenly announced he wanted to be an Episcopal priest. His congregationalist father was not especially pleased with that idea, and so he convinced him instead to work first as a teacher in a school for the deaf. So he did that, but in the end he was ordained anyway, and was the founder of what we think is the first church for the deaf in the Episcopal Church. Also, you may know that Gallaudet College in Washington is named after him. One of his protégés, one of his particularly clever students, was Henry Winter Sile, a young man who had been born deaf or become deaf soon after as a result of illness. And he apparently was a brilliant scholar. He had degrees from Oxford and from Yale and 2 or 3 other places I'm forgetting. He also felt a call to ordination. Initially, the church wouldn't do it because there was a concern among others in the church that missing one of the basic human senses should be an impediment to ordination. But eventually they were won over, and he was in fact ordained and started yet another church for the deaf. What both of them were doing, I think, is also what Jesus is doing in the story. Whatever else may be going on, whatever miracle may happen, Jesus has made this woman visible. There are lots of reasons why people are invisible to us, I'm sure you will know. There are some people who just aren't important enough for us to notice them. There are some people who just can't do anything for us, and so we choose to ignore them. Worse, there are those who, if we ever did notice them, we would then feel we had to do something about their situation, and so we choose to be oblivious for as long as we can, and I'm betting that's what was going on in that synagogue that day. This woman who had been around for 18 years, that's long enough for someone to have noticed if they were going to. The fact that they didn't was probably irritating to Jesus. So not only has he made her visible to everybody else by doing this thing in the middle of church, what more public place can you think of? But he's also told them that God sees this woman. And if God sees this woman, how can they not? That was very much, I think, also what Gallaudet and Father Sile were doing. Father Sile, in the case of a deaf man in the front of the room, there's hardly any more public place than that. They were saying, we are among you. There are people among you whom you have chosen not to see. I'm mixing metaphors here, but work with me on it. Calling them out in public. Here we are. Here are these faithful people among you. Having seen them, we can't unsee them. It's all very well to say it's a nice, polite story about a woman who was bent over 2,000 years ago, or people who were deaf 200 years ago. But it does make us stop and think, who are we failing to see? Who passes through here, through our midst every day, whose needs we fail to see, whom we fail to recognize, either because they seem too unimportant or because dealing with whatever is going on with them would just be too difficult. Kind of a downer to end the sermon on that, but there you are. I think if others have found ways around this, have found ways to recognize the presence of children of God among them, we can do no less. So let's start looking. Amen.